Hello, this is Dr. Eugenie Scott from the National Center for Science Education. Welcome to the Skeptic Zone.
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 565 for the 18th of August, 2019. Richard Saunders here with you from the office of Dr. Eugenie Scott, a long-time friend of the Skeptic Zone. I'm visiting Dr. Eugenie Scott today and using her office to finish off the last bits of this week's Skeptic Zone. Coming up on this week's show, we have an interview with Jo Thornley, who is the author and the producer of a podcast called Zealot. Zealot, all about cults, religious cults, strange cults, personality cults, things like David Koresh or Jim Jones way back in the 1980s with Jonestown. Her podcast and book revolve around the study of cults. Why do people join cults? What's the appeal? Who are these gurus they follow and what's their motivation? Find out with Jo Thornley at the top of the show, and don't forget, Jo Thornley is one of the guest speakers at this year's Skepticon in Melbourne. Following that, it's Heidi Robertson, the Raw Skeptic. Heidi's going to be telling us about a press release policy statement by the Therapeutic Goods Administration, the TGA, in Australia, concerning so-called bioresonance machines. Now, these have been around for a long time. These are these, quite frankly, quack machines that you get hooked up to you somehow. And supposedly they send waves or frequencies into your body and they bounce around and come back and tell the operator what's wrong with you. The most obvious example of this sort of thing I've seen is called the Metatron, which I see at Mind Body Wallet festivals. And it's bordering on absurd, laughable. It's more or less a laptop. You put on a pair of headphones, they run a program on the laptop, a frequency is sent through the headphones. This is real, folks. This is what they claim. A frequency is sent through the headphones into your body. Apparently, this goes through your body, comes back to the computer, and shows you what's wrong with your internal organs down to the level of DNA. Now, of course, to you and me, it's an absurdity. It's obviously quackery, it's a phony, it's a fake. It can't possibly work, maybe on Star Trek. But I get the feeling to many people operating them or buying them from whoever, and they think it's real, some sort of special technology from Russia or something like that. But I digress. Find out more about the government, hopefully, about time, cracking down on these quack machines with Heidi Robertson. Cracking down on these quack machines. Save that 3 times quickly. Quacking down. Quacking down on crack machines. Quack. Then to round off the show, another item from the pages of The Skeptic. An Innocent Among the UFO Believers by Barry Williams, recounting the time he spoke at a science fair before a group of UFO believers. Well, that's enough for me at the moment. It's time for me to rush out the door, down the hall, and I think Dr. Scott might have some hamburgers ready to go while I munch those. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. And joining me now on the line all the way from Sydney, Australia. How exotic is that? It's Jo Thornley. Hello, Jo.
Hello.
Wonderful to catch up with you. We have met many years ago at an event regarding homeopathy, if I remember.
Oh, when we all committed suicide.
We all committed suicide.
Yes.
Which wasn't very successful.
I was awake for hours afterwards.
That's right. We consumed copious amounts of homeopathic sleeping pills.
Ooh.
That was a lot of fun. It
They were tasty. I like lollies.
Yes. Actually, I like lollies. The homeopathic pills aren't very. You can eat one or two and they're a bit fun, and you crunch them down. But I wouldn't substitute them for jelly beans.
No, but maybe they should adopt "I like lollies" as a marketing slogan. Might work.
It might work. It might. Well, they might have to before too long, because the whole industry is being diluted. Oh, we could do homeopathy jokes for a long time. We're not here to talk about homeopathy. We're here to talk about some other craziness. And you, I'm delighted to say, you will be appearing, and we can talk about this a bit later, at the Australian Skeptics National Convention, Skepticon 2019 in Melbourne in December. But the topic I assume you're going to be talking on is a deeply fascinating one that skeptics will find very interesting indeed. It's all about cults, various cults bordering on religious cults or extreme belief cults from around the world. What got you interested in such an interesting topic?
I've always been interested in the dark topics, so a bit of an interest in serial killers when I was a teenager. I think the story is dark stories, but also a bit of deception and some crime mixed in. That's always fascinated me. And I think cults in particular, they're quite often the weirdest stories or the quirkiest. I just became fixated. And I've always been interested in religions as well, what makes them tick, what makes people believe. And so the combination is irresistible to me.
Yeah, it's fascinating you should say that you had an interest in things like serial killers, because I noticed, and we can talk about your very interesting podcast, which is called Zealot. And there's a book too, which we'll get to. But the logo for Zealot, your logo, when I looked at it, I thought, that looks oddly familiar. Then it dawned upon me, it's very like the Zodiac from the San Francisco Bay Area, that serial killer.
I realised that the O in about a year after I'd designed it, I realised that the O in my logo was reminiscent of that. And I just thought, oh, God, what other squiggles of my brain have retained horrible, dark bits of information.
Is that a fact? Because I looked at it and I thought, oh, you were very clever and you modelled it off the Zodiac killer. Oh,
not clever at all. Completely accidental.
Well, that's interesting. Oh, how about that? Maybe in some dark recess of your brain, that little squiggle was just waiting to come out.
I mean, there's a chance I am the Zodiac killer, but I don't think the timelines match up.
A very slim chance. And that is a fascinating topic all in its own. And I guess we can talk about the crossover, in a way, of true crime and the surge, or the amazing rise of true crime podcasts, which I find deeply fascinating, and I'm sure you do too. Absolutely.
And I think one of the things I've noticed about the true crime fandom, is that it's probably about 80% women, and I haven't really understood or been told any really convincing reasons for that. But I think there's always been an interest in true crime and pulp crime and that sort of thing. But I think with the twin popularity of podcasts and video on demand, so non-mainstream broadcast advertiser-run TV that's been available, there's the opportunity to tell stories that are a little less mainstream and a little more investigative and a bit more shocking. I think those platforms, there's fewer regulations and there's a lot more opportunity for risk-taking and creativity. So some really incredible stories are coming out of those two media.
Well, of course, podcasting is what an interesting thing it is in itself, as I well know. But tell me, what got you inspired then to think that you would do your own podcast?
Well, I couldn't stop thinking about or reading about cults, and I'd actually been on a mate's FBI radio show, and he's got a show called Versus, Eddie Sharp, where two topics are discussed, and then callers ring in and vote for for the topic they think is the most interesting. And I thought, I've got to beat him. I've got to win this competition. And so I picked cults.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I just could not. I won, hooray! But after that, I could not stop reading and just devouring anything I could find about cults. And I kind of have to turn everything into a project. And it gave me an excuse. I think it would have felt just, if I'm just spending all of my time reading about cults, I'm a weirdo. But if I can call it research for a podcast, then I'm a podcaster. So I think it was an opportunity to keep researching them.
Yeah. One of the things that I found very interesting about your podcast when I was looking down the list of episodes was the Australian cults, the Australian angle. Of course, you cover many cults from around the world, but I guess being in Australia, the Australian angle is particularly interesting. And we can chat briefly about one called Little Pebble. In a nutshell, how would you describe Little Pebble to the rest of the world?
Well, little. And kind of, to put it nicely, I'd say a deluded pedophile who's addicted to his own delusions of grandeur.
And that's putting it nicely, right? Okay.
That's putting it nicely, yes. Right. I mean, he's just waiting, fingers crossed, with hope that the Vatican will one day recognise him, but also believes he was wrongfully imprisoned for having sex with underage girls. So I think that is about the nicest way I can put it. And not a nice bloke.
He's still in prison,
No, he's served his time and he's out,
okay.
And now he's looking to have his conviction overturned. But I'm pretty sure that ship has sailed.
I would think so. Now he was operating on the south coast of New South Wales, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, and they even did stuck some dynamite in a nearby hill because they wanted to make their own catacombs.
Ooh. That's a bit extreme.
Well, they thought it'd impress the Vatican. They've got some.
Good grief. So, I mean, it's a hallmark of the cult, I guess, that you have the guru. Is that what you've found in most cases?
Yes, and some are more impressive than others. But generally speaking, because the leader of a cult will have an incredibly healthy dose of narcissism, they tend to work themselves into the origin story of the group. So some will do it relatively gently, like the Bhagwan Rajneesh of the Rajneeshis, and others will do it incredibly humbly, like Marshall Applewhite of Heaven's Gate, who really shunned any kind of publicity or adoration. And others, like David Koresh, who was born Vernon Howell, will do it pretty much so he can feel like a big man, increase his chances of getting a record deal, and again, it's a recurring motif, have sex with young girls.
What is it you find in common amongst the believers, the followers of a cult or a guru, or is that putting it too simply? Is it something you really can't define?
I'd say that the only thing that they really have in common is kind of bad timing. There's a number of different reasons people join cults, and unlike what you might think is a common thing, gullibility isn't necessarily a part of it.
Right.
Everyone has different points in the graph of their life where they're going through a bit of a change. They might be divorced. You might be a teenager trying to figure out what life's all about. You might be, that special breed of person, a first-year psychology student, that kind of thing, where you're just at a point in your life where you're looking for either meaning or something else, or to wipe the slate clean, or you might just be dissatisfied with your current religion and you're just ready for a new one. So it's not necessarily gullibility, naivety, stupidity, or even necessarily being easily malleable. It's just looking for someone or something to show them what the next step is, or they might want to change the world or save it. I do think we might be in prime cult development territory now, because you combine the internet with a lot of people being disillusioned with the way the world is, and it being the internet making it really, really easy to make things that aren't true seem true. That's all you need, really.
Before we leave the various cults for a moment, there's one last one I'll get you to comment on briefly, and I saw this come up. I haven't listened to the episode yet. The cult revolving around Prince Philip.
Look, I don't want to describe any cults as adorable, but the Prince Philip movement is adorable. There's a class of cults called cargo cults.
Right.
And they're generally based in Vanuatu and Papua New Guinea. And they generally started with some fairly remote tribes and other groups in those areas around World War II, when American soldiers would come through, because those areas were used as a base. And the islanders would see, and I know this sounds like I'm being provincial, but it was of the time, and these are some fairly isolated groups.
Yeah.
They would see the clothing and the products that these people would bring with them, and they thought, oh, these are people who have been blessed by gods. And they saw possessions as a symbol of divinity, and that, you're spiritually superior, therefore the gods have blessed you with these products, which they would see manifesting via cargo. So there's people making models of planes and that sort of thing. And because of colonialism, in some buildings or official, like post offices, or in the towns, there might be a picture of the Queen put up in these buildings that some tribal elders have access to when they go and do duties down the road. And so they would see, most of them didn't think that the Queen would be the deity. They saw Prince Philip, he's the man, therefore he must be a god, and he had all the riches in the world. So they thought, right, he's got the most stuff. He's the big man that's in photographs on the other side of the world. He must be a god.
Wow.
So there's a specific group in Papua New Guinea that worships Prince Philip as a god.
Okay, and I've certainly heard of that along the years. And I guess you're right. Would you call it a cult, or would you call it something else? But it sort of loosely fits the definition, I guess.
Well, yeah, it kind of does. But, the definition of cults is generally loose anyway.
Right.
Because nobody wants to draw the line between mainstream religions and cults. It's too risky.
Right, interesting.
But cargo cults have developed that name over history, and that's one of the things I like to do as well. And I think I did an episode on R. Kelly because the media has said he's running a sex cult, and I do like sometimes to examine whether things that are called cults do have the loose criteria, and to what extent. Sometimes it's just a good yarn. Sometimes it is more culty than you expect.
Now, is this the sort of, all these cults, are they mentioned in your book? And please tell us a little bit about your book. Did that come first, or was the podcast came first?
The podcast came first, and I think with the book I've included quite a lot of Australian references, and most of the cults in it. It's just focused on 10 of my favourites.
Right.
And I really hesitate to use the word favourites.
Yeah, I thought it was a strange choice of word, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. For example, David Koresh. So the Branch Davidians, they recruited heavily in Australia, and they had a number of Australians died in the fire at Waco.
Right.
The family, the Australian cult based at Lake Eildon. But it's basically the 10 cults that I find the most interesting, or might be the most well-known, or in the example of a lesser-known cult called Colonia Dignidad, which was a bunch of German expatriates in Chile, headed by an actual ex-Nazi, and that was one of the most horrific cults. Barbed wire, Alsatians.
Wow.
Awful child sexual abuse, imprisonment, and everyone needing to be completely silent at all times.
Wow.
That one, I kept that one near the middle because you really need something a little more upbeat after that one to not despair. So I picked the ones that I think had the best, meatiest stories with a tiny bit of horror mixed in.
Just the right amount. Now, where can people pick up a copy of that book?
I'd love to say it's in all good bookstores, but it's also in the bad ones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, and it's available online, and I had a great time recording the audiobook, which is available on all the audiobook apps as well.
All right. Well, folks, look, I will link to the URL for Jo's book in this week's show notes. I shall also link to the URL for your podcast, which people can eavesdrop in on and have a listen to all the different cults that you talk about. And finally, yes, great news, you will be appearing at Skepticon 2019 in Melbourne. And I guess what we've just lightly touched on today is the sort of thing you're going to be telling the audience down there in Melbourne.
Yes, I hope to look into how cult leaders recruit people and what makes those people believe, and give some hopefully entertaining examples.
Looking forward to that immensely. Of course, it's a fascinating area, but as you mentioned, the horror aspects of it, the very real dangers, the sad suicides that we hear about, and the abuse you have mentioned, is the very serious side indeed of cults. But altogether, I think it's a very worthwhile thing for skeptics, especially, to learn about and hear about. And folks, you can do that by listening to Jo's podcast, reading her book, or seeing her in person at Skepticon 2019. Well, Jo, that's great. You've whetted my appetite for some more. I might have another listen to your podcast, and I look forward to seeing you in Melbourne. But for now, thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard.
Skepticon 2019, the Australian Skeptics National Convention, will be in Melbourne from the 6th to the 8th of December. We have an impressive speaker lineup, including The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, Dr. Steve Novella, Jay Novella, Cara Santa Maria, Bob Novella, and Evan Bernstein. Also, Susan Gerbeck from Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia. And many other international and local guests, including Jo Thornley, the host of Zealot, a podcast about cults, and an author of a book by the same name. Skepticon includes a trivia night on Thursday the 5th of December to test your skeptical knowledge. For more information about the event, the speakers, and how to buy tickets, visit skepticon.org.au or follow the link in this week's show notes. It's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson.
Hello everyone, this is Heidi Robertson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters. The Therapeutic Goods Administration, otherwise known as the TGA, here in Australia, is part of the Australian Department of Health and is responsible for regulating therapeutic goods, including, as per their website, quote, prescription medicines, vaccines, sunscreens, vitamins and minerals, medical devices, blood and blood products, end quote. In addition, quote, almost any product for which therapeutic claims are made must be entered into the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods before it can be supplied in Australia, end quote. Long-time listeners of the Skeptic Zone podcast may recall a report I did way back in episode number 348, which gives a rundown on the next level quackery that is the bioresonance machine. So it's good news that the TGA has released the following statement dated the 16th of August 2019. It's titled TGA Cracking Down on Non-Compliant Advertising of Bioresonance and Similar Devices. Quote, in May 2019, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, the TGA, commenced work on a sector-wide compliance activity relating to the advertising of bioresonance devices, which are sometimes mistakenly promoted as biofeedback devices. This sector has been identified as having a high rate of advertising non-compliance, with widespread advertising. The advertising of bioresonance has been the subject of previous regulatory compliance actions. Bioresonance is based on the belief that human beings emit electromagnetic waves, which can only be measured by bioresonance devices. Advertisers claim these devices can measure these waves to detect illness in the human body, as well as sending, quote, rehabilitated bad, end quote, waves to the patient to alleviate illness. The TGA is currently investigating the scientific credibility relating to the diagnostic and therapeutic use of these devices. The TGA is also working to address other concerns about the advertising of these devices by a large number of health practitioners promoting them for the detection and treatment of serious ailments, diseases, and conditions. These claims are prohibited and restricted representations. Some non-compliant advertisements claim that this therapy can assist with or treat severe health conditions like cancers or diseases, joint pain, osteoarthritis, clearing the body of heavy metals, disorders like chronic fatigue and insomnia, mental health conditions including anxiety and ADHD, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, food allergies or intolerances, addictions, autism, learning difficulties, and the side effects of Western medicines including chemotherapy and antibiotics. What the TGA will do. We take non-compliance by advertisers seriously, particularly when there is the potential for consumers to rely on claims in advertising to seek treatment when those claims may be false or misleading. As a result, the TGA is conducting a regulatory activity as a priority in this sector. This includes working closely with our counterparts, including other federal regulators and state and territory government bodies and professional bodies, to share the information on our activities on bioresonance device non-compliance issues, writing to relevant practitioner peak bodies and sponsors of bioresonance devices to alert them to the advertising compliance issues faced by their sector and seek their assistance with disseminating information and rectifying these issues. 2 months following the completion of this activity, the TGA will conduct a round of random advertising reviews, gauging the level of compliance achieved. All non-compliant cases identified will be escalated to a higher level of non-compliance category for investigation, where appropriate compliance enforcement actions will be applied. What you should do if you advertise bioresonance devices. If you have advertised or intend to advertise these types of devices, you should talk to your peak body or regulatory affairs consultant. Check if the device is on the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods, the ARTG. If the device is not on the ARTG, don't advertise the product. If the device is on the ARTG, make sure your advertising is compliant with the advertising requirements and don't refer to prohibited representations or restricted representations. Considering bioresonance? If you are considering seeking diagnosis or treatment of your health conditions using bioresonance, biofeedback, and similar devices, please read 3 questions to ask natural health practitioners about testing services. And there they link to another page within the TGA website. For further information, you can contact the TGA. End quote. So this is good news, as I believe, or at least I've not found a bioresonance device that actually is listed on the ARTG, and just based on that alone, practitioners should not even be advertising the product, let alone making the sorts of claims that they're making that bioresonance therapy can do or can achieve for their patients or their clients. So now's the time to write into the TGA with some concerns or complaints. It's quite easy to find bioresonance practitioners just by Googling exactly that, Bioresonance Practitioners Australia. And no doubt there is one within your vicinity or close by in Australia. And hopefully the TGA will do what they've said they will do and crack down on this device and these practitioners. Thanks for listening. And till next time, this has been Heidi Robertson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters.
Hello, listeners of Maximum Fun. I want to tell you about our newest podcast that tells you all about the truth of the flat Earth.
Have you been looking out over the horizon and you've been thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't look round. I've been lied to my whole life.
What is NASA doing with $52 million a day?
Come on. We explode the myths.
Just kidding. We're Oh No, Ross and Carrie, and we investigate extraordinary claims.
That's right. We investigate extraordinary claims firsthand. We go undercover in fringe groups. We get alternative medicine treatments. And we hang out with people who have unusual beliefs, like flat earthers, 9/11 truthers.
We do ghost investigations. We've joined Scientology, and we got baptized in the Mormon Church.
If it goes bump in the night, then so do we. Why don't you check out Oh No, Ross and Carrie at MaximumFun.org.
And now it's time to dive once again into the pages of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian skeptics, all the way back to 1994, volume 14, number 4. On page 22, a report by Barry Williams, An Innocent Among the UFOnauts. Sometimes you let yourself in for things that on mature reflection you probably wish you hadn't. In September, I agreed to speak at the Great Australian Science Show in Sydney and gave, as the title of my talk, I was abducted by a UFO. This subject was used by the organisers in their publicity for the show, and the fact that a skeptic was giving a talk with that title received a monicum of light-hearted coverage in the media. On the fateful day, I arrived at the lecture theatre to find a full house, a fact I attributed to my identification during a similar appearance the previous year as Professor Barry Williams. During the intervening time, I let no opportunity pass to remind my professorial acquaintances that, while they had to strive with research, teaching, indulgence in university politics, crawling to vice-chancellors to achieve their exalted positions, I had acquired equal distinction with no expenditure of effort whatsoever. Not being one to disappoint an audience, I assumed my best pseudo-academic demeanour and proceeded to give forth pearls of distilled wisdom on the phenomenon of UFO abductions, with not a few sideways excursions to give verbal kickings to creationists, astrologers and diviners, and other New Age crackpots. Carried away with my own rhetoric, I paid scant attention to a certain restiveness among the assembled multitude, or at least, if I did notice it, I put it down to the obviously uncomfortable seating arrangements, When my dissertation came to its inevitable, only unkind people would say overdue, conclusion, I beamed out at the audience, noting in the front row the friendly, smiling faces of longtime skeptics, Fred and Sila Flato, and asked 4 questions. The first came from a young man who launched into a ringing denunciation of me for daring to question the bona fides of such UFO gurus as Professor John Mack, before declaring me a very dangerous man and demanding that I explain the marks on my body. My response was that the only serious danger I posed to anyone would be if I stumbled and fell on them. Then I tried to explain that the encouragement of people in their delusions, rather than an offer of professional help to understand them, was probably the greatest danger that existed in the UFO abduction debate. I couldn't see any marks on his body. Not being trained in any medical skills, I probably wouldn't be able to explain them even if I could. I therefore suggested that he ask someone so trained to have a look. As he seemed to want to continue the discussion at length, I asked him to see me after and asked for more questions. The next came from another young man who advanced that good old standby of the New Age doctrine. Didn't I think it was time for a paradigm shift in scientific thinking if Western science couldn't explain all the mystical things that people were experiencing? My response was equally standard, that we needed a great deal more evidence that any such things were in fact happening before we needed to disregard the most successful tool we had yet devised for understanding the natural world. At this stage I made a private resolution to myself to endeavour to meet the philosopher who gave the term paradigm shift to the world. I would like to drop him down a lift shaft. This young man also seemed to wish to debate the matter at length, while the original young man indicated his desire to continue his discussion, and a couple of others threw queries in a similar vein, with everyone exhibiting the distressing tendency of talking at once. Only the Flatos and a visiting Victorian skeptic, whose name I did not catch, seemed inclined to join the debate on my side. And there I must confess my admiration for Sila Flato, whose tenacity in pursuit of a point would make Ian Plimer envious. A horrible thought began to dawn on me. Here was I, almost alone and defenceless in a room full of people who seriously believed that they had been unwilling guests on alien vessels. Where was the nearest exit? Beam me up, Scotty. Nervously I concluded the session and was presented, by the young man with the marks on his body, with a photocopy of a magazine article which described how he had received them. He had awakened in his room to find mysterious figures at his bedside. He was paralyzed, and after various adventures he had awakened to find the strange wounds on his legs. The photographs with the article showed a couple of scars or depressions in his leg, and the accompanying caption said that some doctors claimed they looked like the marks left by biopsy punctures. To me, they bore a striking resemblance to the scar left on my nose, where a skin cancer had been removed recently by a plastic surgeon. Wait a minute, a mark on my nose? The second favourite site for alien experimentation on humans, after the naughty bits. I therefore resolved to investigate my plastic surgeon, who for ethical reasons I cannot name here, although he does subscribe to the Skeptic. All I wish to say to him is, quote, Dr. X, or should that be X percentage 3 asterisk exclamation 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 question mark from the Pleiades, your secret remains safe with me, or it will if you leave a substantial sum in small denomination unmarked notes in the Skeptic's post box office. End quote. The young man also left me a leaflet praising the work of Dr. Mack and advertising a Sydney Centre for assisting UFO abductees, of which he seemed to be the principal officer. Perhaps, after all, his attack on me was not entirely a disinterested one. After the event, I fell into conversation with Bill Chalker, one of the more rational of the UFO investigators. Bill threw at me the accusation that skeptics do not investigate UFO sightings but merely call the sightings into question. I responded that it remains entirely the responsibility of those making extraordinary claims to provide the extraordinary evidence to support them, and that the proper role for a skeptic is to raise doubts, to ask questions, to keep the enterprise within the bounds of reason or within the constraints imposed by the evidence. We agreed that around 97% of UFO sightings could be easily explained as misperceptions of common natural or artificial phenomena, self-delusions or hoaxes, which left a residue of sightings that were not so easily categorized. Bill's contention was that someone, the skeptics, the government, science, had a duty to explore these sightings and to explain them to the public at large. My response was that if anyone found these sightings to be interesting enough, then they certainly would be investigated, but that there was no compulsion on anyone to do so. Which is where the skeptic and the believer, even a reasonably rational one, part company. Most of the interest in UFOs among the public stems from the wild stories and even wilder hypotheses that are promulgated by the irrational UFOnauts. When that mad hyperbole is discounted, then the remaining phenomena are not all that exciting to the average punter, or, for that matter, to the average scientist. So the investigation of the residue of sightings is unlikely to attract funding or interest from among the scientific community until there is sufficient evidence that such interest will be rewarded with tangible results. This is best exemplified by the strange social phenomenon of crop circles. When simple circles started appearing in grain crops, people began to investigate them to find the explanation, which usually took the form of a meteorological phenomenon. As the circles became more elaborate, so even more rapidly did the explanations diverge from the rational. Extraterrestrials, Gaia, ghosties, ghoulies, and long-legged beasties, and things that go bump in the night, were all blamed. But the most logical explanation, and very probably the correct one, the human propensity to have a joke, was universally denigrated by those who wanted to believe. The investigations and the explanations got wilder and wilder. That is, until the evidence of ordinary humans being the cause, and the continuing inability of those who had become self-elected experts to distinguish between a hoax and a highly dubious real thing became overwhelming. Not that this will be enough to deter the dedicated conspiracy theorist from concluding that it is all a government plot. But now we find some of the less fanciful seriologists, as they describe themselves, returning to the mundane, not at all elaborate, circles in crops and postulating that they could be caused by whirlwinds, to which the scientific community will no doubt respond with a very low volume, "Wow." Has anything useful emerged from the crop circle phenomenon? Possibly a marginal advance in the science of meteorology, and certainly a lot of new data for those who study the idiosyncratic ways of the species Homo sapiens sapiens. But very few insights into the methods and the motivations of Gaia, ghosties, or ghoulies et al. And that is the problem the serious UFO investigator faces. If we strip away the fantasy, there just might be some new knowledge to be gained about natural phenomena. There might even be evidence that extraterrestrials are visiting our planet, although one would be advised not to bet the mortgage on it. But while the preponderance of UFO believers continue to offer the most ridiculous hypotheses about what is going on, the serious researcher will continue to fight an uphill battle. The reason why very few people will take this research seriously is not because skeptics raise doubts, but because his less rational allies have so muddied the water that no one wants to drink from the fountain. And that was An Innocent Among the UFOnauts by Barry Williams, written way back in 1994. And I think it's pretty fair to say that UFOs have, They've really slipped down the list of priorities faced by skeptics in the modern world. I wonder where they went. One of the reasons, I think, is because so many people now carry with them high-definition video cameras. I have 3, I think. And if you have a smartphone, you probably have one too. But one of the reasons I became interested in skepticism in the first place was the UFO craze of the 1970s. Or should I say, one of the reasons I got interested in UFOs was the UFO craze, and eventually that led to skepticism. And I think there is a certain amount of nostalgia now to look back to those days when lots of people were expecting aliens to visit us at any time. But that report is free for you to view for yourself by visiting www.skeptics.com.au, as well as thousands of other reports, interviews, articles in the pages of The Skeptic, and you can subscribe to The Skeptic right now at skeptics.com.au, and that can be delivered to your email address as a PDF 4 times a year, or indeed it can be delivered to your house so you can read it in the bath as the printed edition. The Skeptic magazine, the journal from Australian skeptics. Subscribe online to the world's second oldest skeptical magazine. Visit www.skeptics.com.au and click the publications link. You can also find there over 30 years of back issues free to download. The Skeptic, the magazine from Australian skeptics. Thank you for listening to The Skeptic Zone. Now, folks, if you check out this week's show notes, I'm going to link to a radio interview done recently in Canberra with Trish Han, who is one of the reporters here on The Skeptic Zone and a Vice President of Australian Skeptics in New South Wales. Recently, Trish was in Canberra to speak to the local skeptics there about woman's woo aimed at women, general woo, or specifically woo aimed at women. And she was on Canberra radio. And an interesting interview with Trish. Have a look at the show notes for that link. Now, I'm looking forward to meeting Skeptic Zone fans at Dragon Con in Atlanta, Georgia. If you come to the Skep Track, please come and say hello. I'm doing a few panels and sessions there, but I'll be generally around the skeptical track, I think, chatting to my friend Derek Colanduno, Dr. Angie Matke, and the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, just to name drop a few. Thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. Your contribution means that the show remains online. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Berkeley, California. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.